Welcome to the Dougherty County Board of Commissioners meeting with your chairman, Christopher S. Cohilas. Your commissioners include, from District 1, Commissioner Ed Newsom. From District 2, Commissioner Victor Edwards. From District 3, Commissioner Clinton Johnson. From District 4, Commissioner Russell Gray. From District 5, Commissioner Gloria Gaines. And from District 6, Commissioner Anthony Jones. Also joining us is your County Administrator, Michael McCoy, Assistant County Administrator, Scott Addison, County Clerk, Joanne Ware, and County Attorney, Spencer Lee. Thank you for joining your Dougherty County Commission meeting.
Good morning. I'd like to call the Dougherty County Commissioner meeting to order. Calling, first of all, we're going to do the roll call. Mr. Newsom? Here. Mr. Johnson?
Present.
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Commissioner Gaines?
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair.
Good morning, Ms. Gaines. Commissioner Jones?
President, good morning, Mr. Vice Chair, President in my home, sir.
I appreciate that. Thank you for joining us this morning. All of us are present. One thing I like to do a little bit different is call down Pastor Williamson. If you would, I'd still like to do a prayer, and you can come down to the well right here. This is Pastor Williamson from Blue Springs Baptist Church that's located on Radium Springs. Do you want us to stand?
Yes. Before any great or important circumstance, we must call on the Master. And I'd like for us to stand, bow your heads, humble your hearts. Eternal God, our Father, as we assemble ourselves with this body of governance, with humble hearts and bowed heads, we approach your throne of grace. Hear us, O God, as we pour out our hearts to thee. God, we realize that the government is upon your shoulders. And since it is upon your shoulders, we ask favor and guidance upon each one of these commissioners, lawyers, all the staff. We pray for Christ's vision, that they in all Dougherty County will come together as one. As divided as this country is, direct them towards unity. There is an old adage that says, united we stand, divided we fall. Again, most gracious Father, show these commissioners favor, that they be the example you are looking for in the ruling of your kingdom here on earth. We praise you, we magnify your holy name, and it is in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you, Pastor Williamson. Then the next item on the agenda is number 3, delegation. The commission will hear comments on those items pertaining to Dougherty County for which a public hearing has not been held or scheduled. Please be brief, to the point, and considerate of time of others. Any delegations that's not on the agenda like to come forth to speak to the commission? If not, we'll move on. Item A, Mr. William Wright, representative of AFRAM Tech Incorporated, is present to continue addressing the concerns to the commission. Mr. Wright.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Lee, Mr. McCoy, and have for your consideration, first of all, a supplement to the continuation of information it will help to make it more sense, I think, as we go along. The supplement just answers many of the questions that are on there, so I think that as we get to.
Hey, Mr. Wright, as we get going, can you speak up a little bit? I know the masks make it a little bit difficult to.
Well, how's this?
Much better.
Okay. All right, we'll go to the supplement first, and then, and as it begins on page 2, thank you, our Green New Deal, and this is a part of the information that is in your packet, what we're looking at, and it follows what President Franklin Roosevelt did about 90 years, 89 years ago with the New Deal for America, and we're asking for the same for our local governments. On page 1, you have that, I'm looking at the supplement. When we look at the amount of money, and we know about $1 billion every 16, 18 months, but also we look at the SPLOST dollars, $80 million annually. And we figured this would be the way to fund the Minority Business Enterprise Office. These calculations are based on 1/4% all the way up to 1% from $80 million. You see those numbers as they come out anywhere from $150,000 to $600,000. So that's part of your funding for the MBE office. Naturally, as the interest rate go up, so will that revenue. It's anticipated that we will need 5 employees to start out, and the cost will go up 2.75% annually. Now, one of the things on your page 6, you have here another way of financing the office would be you have as a part of your supplement, you're going to purchase 22 Ford F-150s, and these are the crew cabs, the huge vehicles, and it's estimated they'll probably be about $650,000, and if we take these efforts, we can reduce that cost. For example, the county, the city, and the Board of Education should look at getting demo models. In other words, you don't have to buy a complete new car to have a new car smell. You can get a demo. You can also look at untitled vehicles from Ford or whomever you buy it from. That would bring the cost down from $750,000 to $300,000. So that is your financing for the Minority Business Enterprise Office. And on page 3 of the supplement, where do we want to have it? The Entrepreneur Academy could be held at the Candy Room. We're looking at 3 to 6 p.m. and the dates February 18th to 25th, March 11th, 18th, and 25th.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
For 1 second. The information that you're reading from is a supplement. It's not found on PowerPoint, is it?
Right.
Okay. I wondered, because they're trying to keep up with you on the PowerPoint, but it's not, what you're talking about is not in the PowerPoint, is
Okay,
it?
right, the supplement. Okay, and
Candy Room.
the reason for this, time is of the essence. The third stimulus package is going to expire with the Paycheck Protection Program on March 31. So that not give us much time. Many businesses do not understand how do they handle the forgiveness for the Paycheck Protection Program loan. It starts out as a loan, you have 5 years to pay it back, and it can be revived into a grant if you know what the procedures are. What we're looking at, and that's the educational component on that. Now, any firm in the hospitality industry, that's food service primarily, and to a lesser extent, some clubs where 50% of their revenue come from food sales, they get a third iteration for employee retention. In other words, instead of 2.5, the ratio becomes 3.5. We will forward this information to our federal delegation to look at how that can be done. The other thing is, and this is on page 4 of the supplement, when we look at that, we're asking the county as well as the Board of Education to match the city. The city gave $865,000 to 85 businesses, a $10,000 grant. We're asking the county to do the same. And on page 6 of the supplement, you see this should be decided on February 11th, the purchase of 22 vehicles. Page 8 of the supplement, this is where it's kind of difficult to understand how can we spend these kind of dollars and very few local firms participate. On this page, you see approximately $45 million being spent in one day, and no one even blinked their eye to say why minority businesses are not getting into this money. $45 million in one day. Well, the one before, the county is going to do the same thing and purchase for the sheriff's department. The deputies can function just as well with an untitled vehicle or a demo vehicle. You don't have to have a new car. My car is more than 12 years old. And then the next page, you see a graphic. Again, this is supplement. This graphic shows what happens a local firm versus a non-local firm and do what we can to help minority businesses. The first circle shows that when a local firm gets a contract, 94% of those dollars continues to turn over and create spin-off revenue. If a non-local firm gets that same contract, only 23 cents. So this has already been proven. And the last page shows how do we get the calculations for the 1/4 to 1% to fund the minority business office. This is a stat from a study that was done, and we did a similar study at Albany State on how revenue does not turn over in the African American community. Here was $7.4 billion was spent. Minority business got 1.4% of that. They was in those sales sectors. So that, any way you look at it, that's the case for it. Now we'll go to your information for today and look at that, and then we can look at what can be done. I'm going to the packet information. On page 2 of this, you see the New Deal, the first New Deal. This is the background on it. Where President Franklin Roosevelt promised America a New Deal for relief, recovery, and reform. 1933 to 34, and it was because of the same issues we have, a third iteration of the Great Depression. And he promised that. There was a difference of about 2 months from the time of the inauguration. This was the first 100 days. You see that on page 3. You see under there, relief, recovery, and reform. And that reform, by the way, was in the areas of government regulation. President Roosevelt expanded the role of government because heretofore with Teddy Roosevelt and some of the other presidents, they practiced a policy called laissez-faire. In other words, the government does not need to be trying to help people. The government needs to keep its hands out of the business, and the business of America was business. So the difference in the presidential approach was part of that New Deal. Relief from unemployment, 25%, and that's what historians seem to think, but those of us who instruct economics know that it was much higher than 25%. And on page 6, you see the alphabet approach. President Roosevelt expanded the role, and he expanded it by using something we economists call, well, when you look at it, Keynesian economics. Lord John Maynard Keynes were the ones. And what that basically means is if you ever been on a farm or seen some old westerns, when they go to get water, they would have to go in there and pump 4, 5, 10, 12 times to get the water up. Well, President Roosevelt theorized we need to do the same thing by putting money, infusing money into the U.S. economy. In other words, the government role is to help the people, not to stay out of their affairs where we need to. And then you look on page 8, you see some of those agencies that are still with us today. Imagine what it would be if we still had the WPA. Now, one thing on page 6 I would like to just call to your attention. Look at toward the middle of the page, FDIC. Well, the reason so many banks were failing during the Great Depression was there was no regulation. So one of the things the FDIC did require member banks, and every bank had to be a member. They would have to take 6 to 8% of their reserves and place it in there to provide insurance to keep them from failing. And there are a lot of other programs that you look at. Civilian Conservation Corps putting young men and people to work. And what we now call workforce development, and during the era of President Carter, it was called CETA. Well, they're still around, but we rebranded them as workforce development. It's still the same program as CETA, but rebranded. Well, I call your attention there, you see the second New Deal, and when we look at the second New Deal, many historians seem to say, well, Roosevelt was not doing this and not doing that kind of thing. They say it was World War II that really did everything. So we're not looking for another war. We're saying the government needs to do more. All right, on the next page, you already have the Minority Business Enterprise Program. We gave that to you when you went on your retreat. I would just call your attention to, let's look at page 9, and we've already given you the backdrop. How do you finance it? Well, you may say, well, William, where are we going to have it? Well, the second floor has 2 suites available, 240 East and 260 West are both vacant. That's where it can be housed. As a matter of fact, the previous program was in suite 240. And you see there how the funding will be done. Now I want to call your attention to, let's look at page 9. You see there, the initial goal needs to be around 25%. That's in section 4. Needs to be around 25%. And we're giving you the background information as a part of your supplement for that. One of the things that we have to understand is when you look at disparities that we have in the city of Albany and Dougherty County, those numbers in and of themselves are implicit of adverse impact, discrimination, lack of inclusion, lack of diversity. I mean, to have $7.4 billion spent and only 1% go to minority-owned businesses, I mean, it's crazy. Well, last time we told you about that there are so few employees with minority business. I call your attention to page 12. If you look on page 12, this is what I've been talking about, the SMOBI. Now, for whatever reason, the second President Bush changed SMOBI to SOBI that you see on page 12. President, the second, I'm talking about George W. Bush, or not George H.W. Bush. He thought it revealed too much about how awful it was and how poorly we were treating African-American business. Well, if you look on page 12, look again on the NEC, and this is underscored for you, non-employee characteristics. We told you before it was 85%. When I look at this 2020 edition, it seems to suggest 94% of minority-owned business do not have any employees other than the owner. And that's under NEC characteristics on page 12. And this, keep in mind, now this is the SOBI, not the SMOBI. The SMOBI probably has even more greater detail to show how terrible the condition is, because we took this information at various times. One of the things that the Census Bureau does, during, for example, the iteration of President Clinton, they wanted to use sampling as a technique where you could look at a universe, take a few samples, and then come to a conclusion. Well, the second President Bush did not like that because it reflected so poorly on what America was doing. And the Bureau of Census only released this information every 5 years, so that there's always a problem. But you see those NEC characteristics that show, and this is why the case has been made why we have to look at $10,000 grant, that kind of thing. The other thing is, the same SMOE details that non-minority-owned firms have when we look at assets 10 times that. And when you look at the advent of being an entrepreneur, you see the same thing. Well, and the next page is page 13, and you see there 72% of those same firms earn less than $25,000 a year. I mean, when we were talking last week and it was brought up about the one black firm in Dougherty County got a contract for $25,000, no, I think it was $30,000. But anyway, at $30,000, a person making $7.25 an hour, that would not even pay two at $7.25 an hour. And that's what this shows. Why the case is because of systemic discrimination. This is why this happened. And you see all that, again, this comes from the smoking. Now, the second President Bush did not want this information to get out, but we got some of these reports before the U.S. Census Bureau decided, well, they didn't have much much opportunity to refute what President Bush was requiring, but they did anyway. So, and you have some early on page 14, some data that shows that Georgia ranks 5th in the nation for hiring minority-owned business. California has the highest paid minority-owned business. And that's what that pictorial provides for us. And then you see it broken out. Almost 40% on page 14, almost 40% of minority-owned business, for whatever reason, have chosen to go into healthcare and social systems. This is the kind of things where you get into the non-emergency medical transporting, how they transport people to the doctor appointment, going to maybe supermarket, non-emergency medical transportation. That's what that designation, that category means. Nearly 40%, that's where they operate in that venue. And again, on page 16, you have information broken out that shows for your consideration the strata of minority-owned business, how they make so few dollars. And this is what the Entrepreneur Academy will help also, to help our minority-owned business know how to do. Now, there is some requirement on both sides. I mean, the county, the Board of Education, and the schools, when we look at the school system, spending millions of dollars, just like a 22 truck order as a part of your supplement. And the only thing we get, and when you look at it, it's kind of crazy, you have these words, a verb. The county, the school board, the city shall encourage. That's nothing. It has to be met with action. In other words, there has to be affirmative action to lift up, to include. There has to be the word. You're not doing that by putting a verb in there because there is no requirement. It requires action on the part of the government. That's what President Roosevelt was saying. This is what our New Deal is about. So, again, we have provided you through the supplement. How do we fund it? Where the entrepreneur, date for the Entrepreneur Academy, what do we need to do to move forward on this? We need a new deal more than anyone because we are Smallville. And because of that, the other 13 counties that surround us, only Lee County is a tier 4. If you look at that graphically, you're wondering how can we have 59 counties, and right next to Dougherty County, all these other 13 counties are right up there. The worst it can be, Tier 1. Lee County, Tier 4. I mean, that's the worst you can be, to be in that tier, because it means you have prevailing, pervasive poverty, unemployment, disinvestment. I mean, the only thing we see on routine occasion, or someone is losing their home or the house because of demolition. They cannot afford to put up. Well, if you look at the straight of this data, it suggests they do not have the money to do it in the first place. I mean, how can you do anything when almost 95% of your businesses do not have an employee? Now, let us qualify that. The thing we need to understand about that is probably, now this is just William suggesting it, having been in business for some years, that the 95% that have the non-employee characteristics, they may be paying people who do not show on the 941. That's going around accounting for businesses. They may pay Sister Jones, and I'm not talking about Commissioner Jones, don't get me on that. I'm not talking about that, but Sister Jones' nephew need a job. And the owner said, well, okay, but I cannot pay your FICA and your Medicare and that kind of thing. So they do not show up on a 941 and thus no employees. So we're just suggesting that perhaps that is a small bit of it, but when we look at the 95%, that's still a lot. What that information conveyed to us is that there was 2 million minority-owned businesses. Only 150,000 had employees. That's what the data reflects. And this is from the U.S. Census Bureau. And the way they do that is the Census Bureau have information imported to it from the tax filings that are filed. So that's why the 5-year lag between the time they release information and when they actually archived it. So this is what we need to do. This is part of our new deal. Mr. Chair, stop here and answer any questions. Again, we just want to call it, we've given you the way to finance it, giving you good possible locations, and we need the Entrepreneur Academy, giving you the dates on that, February the 18th and 25th, then looking at March 11th, 18th, and 25th, because again, the Paycheck Protection Program will expire unless the money run out before then. Now, we have not seen the release of the third stimulus bill, but it's going to be time sensitive too.
Okay.
So, see if any questions or anything we did not make clear.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Wright. The chair recognizes Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Wright, I have a couple of questions for you. Are you asking to use this candy room for those 2 days, for those dates?
Right.
You're asking for the use of it?
Right.
And that's 260 East and 260 West or something you said?
No, the workshop will be asking for the candy room, those 5 dates.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
The 5 dates will be for the candy room.
Okay.
Because the way the suite 240 and 260 are situated, if we follow social distancing, you probably could not get any more than 4 or 5 people in there at a time.
Okay.
Because it's not a whole lot of room. But the 240 and the suite 240 East and 260 West would be for the minority business enterprise. That's a location, so that would be some cost saving to look at there. And that's what things should be in government. That's
Sure.
why this is called considered government center.
So your proposal is for us to open up those two rooms for you on those dates. Is that the request?
Well, no, but we could. I mean, it'd just be kind of difficult unless we use, well, we could probably rotate and have a viewer to broadcast or narrowcast to each room.
Okay.
As we were instructing. But ideally, it would be the candy room.
And you would need technical assistance to set up like a video conference?
No, I was thinking it would be better to just do that live, but that was just to be in the case we had to use screens to convey the information. In other words, when we were showing the entrepreneurs and the potential entrepreneurs how things go, and the people who are in the Paycheck Protection Program, we want to try to do them in groups of 15 at a time.
Okay. Now, let me ask this question. Now, if you can't get businesses to sign up at 15 at a time, if it's only 3 or if it's only 5 businesses that want to come and learn what you're teaching as far as the Paycheck Protection Program, are you still going to be able to do that if it's not 15 businesses? If it's only 5, it's only 10?
Oh, yeah, we'll do it.
Are you sure those rooms are available? Have you checked them lately?
What, the 240 and the 260?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm not sure they're available. I can tell you this, they are empty.
They're empty, okay.
And then when you look at the name card, the reason I know that 240 is empty is because that's what procurement is.
In this building?
Right.
Okay.
That's
I got
what
you.
procurement
That's in the
is.
central building. I got you. Okay.
Right. And then on the 260 West, when we look at that, from the employees they have, I did not ever see it growing, them growing any bigger than that. And we could do it there. Only thing we want to do is serve the people, and there would not be any cost. Now, let me qualify this, because a lot of people say, well, we want you to do, we need you to do this and do that. It's difficult to do it one-on-one. In other words, if they come to a Framtech Incorporated, there would be a fee, but the things that we're requesting here, there is no fee to them. This is to help the public.
Sure.
Understand, particularly those businesses that understand, because I've had so many ministers to contact me did not know that they were eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program.
Okay.
Not only them, a lot of times churches and other congregations will have musicians, instructors for the youth and that kind of thing. Well, they would not give them a W-2, they give them 1099.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but they still are eligible for the program, and usually the only person who's getting a W-2 would be the pastor.
So what I'm getting to is you've come before us and you've given us wonderful information week after week, hard work. So let's go forward with it. So we agree with you and what you're saying. We agree with we need to help our small businesses in any way that we possibly can. So to go forward, we need to get you in a room. I think Mr. McCoy is going to work with us and find a location for you again. So before you have any roadblocks, speak with us, let us kind of work through it. If we have to move our location to the library, if something comes up, then let's be flexible on both sides, because we do want to help your cause, because what you're saying is very important, and a lot of people don't know those dollars are out there. And if you're going to help people get access to them, then we want to help you do that by giving you the space, okay? Yes. So you got support, I think, on this commission.
Well, I think it's a slippery slope. I mean, there's plenty of public space available to hold functions like this all throughout the county. Whether it be the public library, reserving rooms, and the minute that, the government starts providing space for this entity and that entity, then we get in a slippery slope where everybody says, well, you let so-and-so use this space, we want to use it too, we want to use it too. There are public spaces already out there, whether they're on school campuses, college campuses, public library, churches, etc. There's plenty of, I think, opportunity outside of the government setting a precedent that we have public space for free use. And I do understand the public benefit of what you're doing, and I encourage, it's alarming to me, the statistic you brought up with how many minority-owned businesses that don't have but one employee.
Well, the Census Bureau reported almost 95%.
Right, that is, from a business model perspective, that is a very fragile and volatile business model when you have nothing but 1099 employees. It affects tax dollar flow, it affects government services, and it puts a lot of responsibility on those contracted employees to pay their own taxes and manage it, and that becomes a liability on their part. So I do think there needs to be a lot of small business coaching and opportunity to share where you can get help. I just don't know that it's, you know, the city or the counties, it's in our purview to provide space for that when there's public space available to get going. Now, you know, certainly as the public latches on to something and it becomes, you know, wildly, you know, supported and attended, you know, we'll help you make space for the overflow. But, you know, I don't know. I just.
Yeah, understood. I hear you. I understand your point. But to do our part, I think one room is owned by the city, one room is owned by the county. The county space, I think, is occupied. The city will have to give you access to their vacant space and procurement or whatever you're referring to. Going back to the library spaces, trying to use those, I think we need to go back to that where we were working in that area. In addition to, Ms. McCoy, is the candy room available for an opening session or something or anything?
We have a policy that governs the utilization of the candy room.
Okay.
Mr. McCoy, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can't hear Mr. McCoy.
All right, can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, you're going in and out.
Okay, hold on, let me get another microphone. Can you hear me now?
I hear you now, loud and clear.
Okay. Excellent. The county has a policy for the utilization of the candy room. So I would have to refer to that.
Okay, but you don't know the policy right off the top?
No, sir.
Can you work Mr. Wright on that policy and let's kind of talk about it
Yes,
further?
Yes,
Okay, so moving past that point about locations, moving past that point, the point you made about the Green New Deal is, I think that's coming from the federal government a lot too. Have you checked with MCLB on their federal contracts and how much they're using minority contractors? Since a lot of what you're talking about is more federal than it is local.
Well, the thing about it is when we look at the Marine base in particular, they are looking for 8A firms, so they do a modest job of utilizing that. That is, there's no overflow with the Marine base. And we have to understand that most of their services, other than janitorial and that kind of thing, are going to be NACO specific. In other words, if you're not 8A, then they probably would not entertain. And they're not into that field when you start looking at munitions and retrofitting and that kind of thing. We have to look at the category of what local government and state government procure as opposed to the federal. The thing about it, when we look at it, this is undergirded by the fact that the city, the county school board are taxing us and not giving us anything back. So we have to understand that. It's one thing to say that, well, we have this and we have that. I've already met with the roadblocks that were mentioned. See, I don't have time to be calling Miss Susan or Mr. Mike or Mr. Jack to tell me what has been pre-recorded. Policy is not law, ladies and gentlemen. What that means is you can always change it. You could have a policy say equal opportunity, but as we pointed out to you last week, how in the world can you be an equal opportunity employer and not ever have an African American or black person that work for the EDC?
That's a good point. Now I want to jump on. I want to jump on that point. That's a very good point you make. It's about policy versus law. And so, just like local participation policy, this commission has adopted that mental policy without actually saying this is the law. We have moved and operated off of local participation by policy that we understand, not policy that is written. Secondarily, when you talk about the EDC, and I know this is closed information, you probably don't know this, but there were actual people who were candidates that were minorities inside of the EDC search pool. And it came down that there was actually a minority hire. people sometimes look at minorities as actually just being of color or of other things, but I think a woman is a minority. And that was a lot of the decision making by putting a woman in place out of the options that were available.
Right, I understand that, Commissioner Johnson, but what I'm saying is 35 years, there's no way that you can be following law as opposed to policy and never, see, it's one thing, it's no different than saying we encourage minority applicants, but one never gets there. That's just like saying, well, we want to go to the moon. I mean, the U.S. want to get to Mars and get to other places. It's a long road, but the point is, when we look at...
And you're doing a good job on this road, and I do applaud the direction you're taking the commission. I mean, you're talking about some very conscious and some very needed discussion. I mean, I think we all agree with you on that. So I want to get to this place where we actually see this movement, and that is, how do we start creating and qualifying minority businesses that can receive these contracts? I think that's where the work has to be done. So that when we start building roads or bridges, because that's what the county original name of the commission was originally, the Commission of Roads and Bridges. When we get back into the infrastructure, which is very close to what Roosevelt had in mind with the Green New Deal and the New Deal and the WPA programs, it was build an infrastructure, build a Hoover Dam, get back to the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, those things that created jobs. So when we start back building roads, when we start building bridges or whatever we're doing in infrastructure, where's that minority company that is bonded, insured, that can either work with a bigger company or work in a smaller contract until it becomes a strong enough company? That is where we have to start actually putting the rubber to the road. When we start asking even our department heads to start looking at hiring minority businesses, when we start asking our administrator, which he does a very good job of, looking for minorities. And so there's been a lot of professional contracts that have been awarded to minorities, and there have been a lot of business contracts. And you're right, it can be more. So let's talk about how do you develop a contractor that can really come to the table, and if they're missing things, we find out how to help them with those things. So that's where I want us to push it, because we believe in everything that you put out here. This is good information, and it's very classic historical information. So how do we take this into 21 and build our community with small businesses, minority businesses, and become stronger? That's where I want the Entrepreneur Academy to start doing. Thank you.
And I like to interject this. I guess I want to go ahead on and put a pin in it right now, though.
Yes, but I do have a question before.
Okay. Commissioner
if you
Gaines.
don't mind. Before you close out, I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Commissioner Gaines.
I didn't want to jump in front of you, however.
Say that.
But if you will allow, then I just need to get Mr. Wright to give me ABC 1, 2, 3. What are the requests you're making of this body today? List them in simple terms. I think there were at least 2.
Okay. The first thing.
Well, can you? I think I guess we've talked about this a lot. I mean, even down 20 years ago. So again, if the commission agree, I'd like to just see us set up a meeting with you. Kind of like an open meeting with the county administrator, as well as, I don't know if Commissioner Gray would like to be a part of the Commissioner Newsom. Well, let's get back, we get with the county administrator, set up a meeting where we can have maybe like a 45 minutes to an hour work session, and just talk about the issues that you talk about, and then address the issues that Commissioner Gaines has mentioned, whether you're really asking the commission, as well as, I think, for the meeting room, like Commissioner Gray said, I think Robert Cross maybe fit the policy, if those dates are available. But I'd like to go ahead on and close it this morning, and direct the county administrator, you and him get together after the meeting and see can we set up a meeting time. That's where I'm going with it, okay?
Mr. Wright, could you call me, please?
Okay, that was Commissioner Gaines asking you to give her a phone call when you get an opportunity. But then that's where, did you understand what I'm saying, Mr. McCoy?
Yes, I'll meet with Mr. Wright after the meeting.
Well, you don't have to be after the meeting, but let's set up a time. Let's set up a date before these dates here, if that's okay, within the week, okay?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm really sorry, but
No, go ahead.
my request was really very simple. He asked for two things, I thought.
Okay.
And I just wanted to be clear when I leave here what those two things were. It was to use our facility for his workshop, and number two was a DBE program, right? Are those the two things you're asking for?
Did you hear questions, Mr. Wright?
oh, yes, that was the three,
Essentially?
yeah, those were the three things: to do the Entrepreneur Academy, and that would be the workshop, to use the candy room for that, some other facility that was equal to the utilization. And I think that's what we're looking at, and then adopt the minority business program, so.
Right, just those two things. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
Three things, really.
yes.
And I guess Commissioner Gaines, where I'm going with it, with the discussion, having a meeting with Mr. McCoy, then he can address those three particular issues and come back to the board and give us some guidance.
I just wanted to be clear in my mind what those three things were.
Okay, okay. Commissioner Jones on the phone, do you have any questions before we close it?
No, I just think that there should be a sit down, not only with the county administrator, because of the fact that you got the city and the Board of Education there. I mean, those entities. I think a conversation needs to be had with Mr. Wright and all of those folks, because you're gonna need buy-in from everyone. And instead of just piecemealing this thing, maybe sit down one time, and then he won't have to keep coming back. And once he sat down and find out what the city is, the county and the Board of Education, I think that would be the smart thing to do with this thing. And if there's any way that we can move forward then with the buy-in from the other two entities as well. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Newsom?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Commissioner Jones right on target. Let's put all these parties together, because you coming to us as one entity, but there's two other entities out there, so we can't function by ourselves to make. I mean, we can give you a room somewhere, but we need the whole program together.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what you're shooting for.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, Mr. Wright, for coming, before the commission, and, you and Mr. McCoy will get together, come up with some times, and, discuss when we can have a meeting and have those questions answered.
Okay, the only thing we would ask is no more roadblocks. Try to keep the roadblocks out.
I really appreciate
that. That's not a good feeling to be in a roadblock. And
Yes,
we have
sir.
already sent the same information that you have to the city. We've met with them a couple of times and sent it by email to the Board of Education.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Wright. The next item on the agenda is number 4, the minutes. You guys take the time, in your spare time and read the minutes. The next item on the agenda is the zoning. Ola M. Brown, owner of Frank Hatley, applicant requests to rezone 14.996 acres from Ag to RG, Single Family Residential District, county only. The property address is 2620 Gibson Road. The Planning Commission recommends approval. Ms. Mary Teeter, Planning Manager, will address the commission. The public hearing and actions are scheduled for February the 15th, 2021. Ms. Mayor.
All right, I was looking for the screen. Okay. I guess I'll just go over to the side here. I don't know if this is going to work or not.
That's fine.
Yep, it does. Okay. And again, the property is located on the south side of Gibson Road, and it's to the west of Moultrie Road. You can see Moultrie Road there along the top there, in the top corner there. And the request is to rezone 14.9 acres from Ag, that's agricultural district, to RG, single family residential district, and it's only in the county only. And they're asking for a rezoning so they can subdivide the property because they have less than 40 acres of Ag property. And the plan is to The applicant would like to construct another house on 12 acres. And there's already a house on the property and it will occupy 2 acres. And again, the Planning Commission recommended approval.
Any of the commissioners have any questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate you, Ms. Mayor.
Okay,
That was quick and sweet.
it was.
The other item, purchases, recommendation to purchase one 2020 Freightliner 11-4SD with attached 2021 Polar SRX 800-1 tank trailer to the solid waste from the lowest responsive and responsible bidder meeting specification 4-star Freightliner of Montgomery, Alabama, in the amount of $173,277. 2 bids were received. Funding is available in solid waste capital outlay. Assistant County Administrator Scott Allison will address. Solid Waste Director Campbell Smith and City of Albany Buyer Tina Strattenberg are present. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This is a replacement for the tanker out at the landfill, and we use that tanker to haul leachate to the wastewater treatment plant for treatment. We recommend approval.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Scott?
Yes, sir. I have one quick question. So Performance Peterbilt Albany did not have that 8,000 gallon tanker? I see that they quoted.
They didn't bid on the tanker portion, and they were higher on the truck.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item B, recommendation to purchase 2 Zoil Medical and Series Monitor D Filbert. Put out there real quick. For the ear, I don't know why I get twisted. D Filbert, say it, Scott.
Defibrillators.
There you go. For the EMS department from single source vendor Zoil Medical Corporation, Kim Force, Massachusetts, in the amount of $61,218.16. Funding is budgeted in SPLOST 7. Assistant County Administrator Scott Addison will address. EMS Director Sam Allen is present also for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are standard replacements. They're replacing ones that reach the end of life cycle. We recommend approval.
Okay. Any commission have any questions for Mr. Sam? Would you like to add anything? Do you? Okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Item C, recommendation to purchase 10 Motorola portable radios for the EMS department from single source vendor Motorola Solutions, Albany, Georgia, in the amount of $37,974.55. Funding is budgeted in SPLOST 7. Assistant County Administrator Scott Addison will address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a life cycle replacement too that we purchased, and we recommend approval.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Scott on this particular issue? Mr. Sam? Okay, sounds good. Moving on to the next. Recommendation to accept the proposal in the amount of $100,080 from Dougherty Engineers, Inc., Atlanta, Georgia, to provide professional engineering services. The services will assess the potential effectiveness of modifying the operation of the Flint River Hydro Project, Muckaphony Dam and Chris Power Dam at the Lake Blackshear on the Flint River to mitigate flooding on Lake Chehaw and Lake Worth. Funding is available in SPLOST 7. Assistant County Administrator Scott Addison will discuss. Public Works Director Larry Cook, Project Engineer Jeremy Brown, and Associate Vice President Sam Fleming -PE are present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were asked to look at the potential for altering the operations of the 2 dams to mitigate flooding, and we reached out to Dougherty engineers that specialize in this type of work, and we've also reached out to Chris Power and Georgia Power as well to show them the scope of work we're looking at to make sure they agree with everything and we didn't leave any stone left unturned. So they're going to look at 3 storm events that have caused flooding and try to model to see if different dam operations would mitigate some of that flooding. And we recommend move forward with this project.
Just a sidebar, I guess going to Commissioner Russell, is this the same situation you was talking about, having the collaboration, being able to diagnose different flooding
This is, this will give us an independent engineering assessment of what the hydrology and the flow of the creeks and rivers in timing with rain events and timing with dam releases and what the permitted regulatory releases are, to see if how we can collaborate between these different entities to be either more predictive of potential flooding events, or to see where we could go back to regulatory bodies at the federal level and see if there's an ability to get permit adjustments to mitigate some of this. It hasn't led to catastrophic flooding along there, but it has begun to create more of a frequent invasive flooding in localized areas along Lake Chehaw. It affects both Dougherty County residents and Lee County residents as well. And this was something that a lot of citizens brought to my attention, and we've had a town hall meeting on it. So this is just the evolution of that.
Okay.
And I think this will give us a very professional snapshot and set of data that will allow us to go work with Georgia Power and Chris Power to see what we can do to mitigate these issues.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Please.
Yes,
I yield to Gaines if she talks.
Commissioner Gaines?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you please tell me, I suppose Mr. Addison or Mr. Cook, I'm not sure, whether or not this is specifically listed in SPLOST 7 as a project? And then can you tell me what our responsibility is for this infrastructure? We don't own it. I don't quite understand what our role is here in spending this kind of money
Okay. You want to answer
for
that?
a facility we don't own or not.
Mr. McCoy is going to address your concern, Commissioner Gaines. Mr. McCoy?
Yes, Chairman, this is not listed as a specific project.
I can't hear you, Mr. McCoy.
Hello, can you hear me? Is this better?
Better.
Okay. This project is not specifically listed in SPLOST 7. So, but it does fall under the category of stormwater management. And although we do not own that particular body of water, there have been citizen complaints. We heard from Mr. Newcomb as well as residents. This board has several times, and Commissioner Gray met with that group and had a town hall meeting. And we've also included the Emergency Management Director, Chief Scott, in this discussion. And this was the result of these meetings to come up with a solution. So it is, we believe, incumbent upon the county to look at this issue and see what viable solutions may be available that we could implement in collaboration with the two utility companies. And so that's what we have in front of you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a bit of money. We do have urgent, he said that this was not necessarily an urgent issue, that we do have some flooding there. We do have, when we put money into that category, I am sure that we were looking at some specific projects, otherwise we could not have come up with a dollar amount. So will we be foregoing a project to fund a project that we never conceived of? And I just don't understand why Dougherty County, as poor as we are, would be the first place to stop to get $180,000 when Georgia Power and whoever else owns the dam up there could very well, and certainly should take the responsibility for investigating the potential for flooding in that area. And I certainly sympathize with the residents up there. But it seems to me that this is not a government responsibility.
Mr. Vice Chairman, may I come in?
Yes, Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, sir. I do have a very, very similar understanding as Commissioner Gaines does, because these services are money-making opportunities for Chris Power or for Georgia Power. And so, in my opinion, it is Dougherty County's position to protect our residents who do live on the creek and who do enjoy lake life, which is very good living. But I do not think that Dougherty County should take this as the lead in putting in this kind of money for something that is being caused upstream. If we go back to the '94 flood and all the other things, when they release water downstream, I mean, eventually downstream is South Albany. And eventually that water flows, and we're south of Cordell, we're south of Lake Blackshear. And so my opinion is I agree with protecting our citizens. I agree with looking at what's happening upstream. And I do agree with stop dumping the water on us when it rains up north. Weather patterns are changing. There's a lot of issues with stormwater. But when you go around Lake Park areas, when you go in South Albany, it's a lot of canals that can be cleaned out and piped and some other things that we could be doing with our stormwater dollars rather than this. But I do want to know how and what's the other contribution going to be made that is going to be made by the other entities. Because looking at the map, it's Lee County in here, there's Dougherty, there's Chris, there's, Cordell. I mean, we're not the only ones that are part of this. I mean, this is a lake system, so I don't know if there's an authority from DNR that controls this entire. Okay, so there's some issues on the state level. I think if we take the initiative to have a report, and this report is going to speak to Georgia Power and Chris Power to say change their flow patterns, and our Dougherty County residents are going to be able to be protected by this engineering independent study, I do think Georgia Power and Chris Power should have some costs in this as well, because a lot of those customers are on Georgia Power and Chris Power services. That's my take on it.
I'd like to echo the District 3 and the District 5 commissioners to the tune of $180,000. That's a lot of money. And I'm sure that we can find some other things around Albany, Dougherty County, that we need to do with that $180,000. You got those big names like Chris Power, all those boys are heavy hitters. I mean, $180,000, may not be a lot to them, but it's a heck of a lot for our folks to swallow. And certainly, I think we need to revisit this one.
Well,
Commissioner Russell?
Let me add a little bit of color there. So, Crisp County Power is governed by an independent board. It's a private entity. Flint River Dam here is owned by Georgia Power. It's a public entity. Both of those answer to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. They have allowances based on a very myopic view of the amount of water that they hold behind the dam and the amount of power that they can generate, and when they can release water to generate power, and how much water they can release. There's very little emphasis put on coordinating the operations and drawdowns of those two facilities in coordination with weather events, whether it be upstream or whether it be in between the two. Residents along the rivers and creeks can tell you pretty precisely how much rain it takes and in what conditions you'll start to see some above average flooding onto their properties. It's only a matter of time, I believe, before these things become less and less predictable as we continue to improve around the Flint River and around Lake Chehaw with stormwater runoff, with paved surfaces, with development, et cetera. We're just not able to really actively model it. This will provide data. The problem with those two entities, these are private entities and they're for profit. They're not interested in changing their policies or procedures to be good neighbors. If so, it would have been one phone call. We could have all gotten on a Zoom chat and fixed the problem. You know, there is communication between the entities, and I don't want to say that it's an adversarial relationship, but their interests aren't aligned. And we're the ones who are, our citizens are the ones who are affected by this. It means more claims on their properties. It means less desirability to live on waterfront property when there's more and more flooding that's occurring frequently. And you know, ultimately, it's what's best for our citizens. We have to quantify this. This study from an independent engineering firm who has expertise in modeling this, and this is not an easy thing to model, can put all of the data and information together that will allow us to go to these entities and say, this is what our ask is on, you know, when and how you release water ahead of a storm or in result of a storm. So we don't want things to get backed up in Lake Chehaw and cause flooding. And you know, this is also somewhat protective of our investment at Radium Springs. It is subject to flooding, and the more we get high water levels and high water loads hitting at the same time, the more water gets backed up Skywater Creek into the spring area, and that's more damage that is potentially occurring in Radium Springs, where we're investing much more than $180,000 into improving that infrastructure, including what more and more frequent and severe flooding could do to the dam and the trail system that we're getting lots and lots of money and putting lots of taxpayers' dollars to work to improve that area. So I do know that $180,000 is a lot for a study that, you know, that is going to help us tell a bunch of rich people how we need them to operate. But we can't make that ask without this information. And if they looked at it, they're going to give us a very one-sided opinion, and they may or may not decide to change their policy. But with this information, we at least have objective information to go to them and work on a coordinated solution that will help all of our taxpayers. I mean, this is the artesian city. That river is our lifeblood, and we need to understand it a little better so we can better protect our assets.
And I do agree with you completely. As far as protecting all of our citizens along the river, I just think that we are taking, the poorest of the counties is taking on the lion's share of the work. And you know that, you know, those are lake houses. You know, we're talking about people who actually live in Dougherty County, who actually live in those homes and are not just visiting in the summer for 3 or 4 months. To protect those units up in, or housing up in Lake Blackshear, and not put any money or any care into what happens downstream is almost like us just letting all our water flow and flood Seminole County or Donaldsonville or something. I just think it's hard for us further downstream and not have as many resources as this company does to go up against FERC, because what they're going to have to do is ask FERC to modify its permit, correct?
Could be. It could just be they could still meet their drawdown allotment just over a longer time period, starting earlier on a drawdown before storms, so that the influx of water into the lower Flint River above Lake Chehaw doesn't come in as such a surge, especially when creek levels are high, because you start to get backflow up the creeks at that point. That's where a lot of your creek flooding occurs, is when those levels are already high. So there are a lot of moving pieces to this as far as forecasting it and modeling it. So we need that expertise to model it. And I agree, we always go to these entities and ask them if they'll help us, recoup some of this this cost, for the study. But it's got to get started, and we have to take that leadership role, because it's been how many years these entities have been in place and operating under the same policies and procedures, and have been aware that these issues occur, but have never changed their policy. So we have to use this as a impetus to begin the process.
Mr. McCoy, can we also...
Let me just say this. A few years back, we had to deal with FERC and this pipeline. And we certainly could have used some assistance in terms of funding our, clarifying our position from the county, but we were unable to access public money to help us build our case with FERC to not impose that pipeline on our citizens. What we did was go to some environmental groups like the Sierra Club, and they were willing to help us because they understood the environmental impact of that pipeline. So I would recommend to you, and I don't know if the people out there have talked with the people at FERC or not, but FERC is bound to listen to any environmental concerns that they may have about what those, how those dams are operating up there. So it just seems to me that starting with the county paying that kind of money is maybe a little bit premature, even if it has to come down the line. But it seems to me the first thing you need to do is really to approach both the private entities and to approach FERC about what could happen up there, rather than coming to the county to help you build that case with that amount of money, or go to some environmental group. But I just have a real hard time with asking for that amount of money to build the case. Now, although I do sympathize with the case.
Mr. Scott?
Yes, sir. Thank you. 2 points of clarification. It is $100,080, not $180,000. Just want to make sure everybody was clear. And the other thing is, Commissioner Johnson, part of this will be modeling downstream on the Flint too, to ensure that there's no flooding downstream.
Down South Albany area?
Past the dam.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good point. And Mr. McCoy, can we also use our cornerstone relationship to lobby the state to make some kind of communication with them to strengthen this proposal? Find out some legislative way we can put a little force on this from the state level? No, you think so? Okay, all right. I think Commissioner Gaines referring to Green Law. Green Law was a firm that jumped and got involved with the FERC battle the first time.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, it is, we've got to have an x-ray of the situation to see what's broken. This is, $100,000 x-ray. I know that's a terrible analogy, but we can't begin to diagnose the problem. We can't begin to formulate a solution or even know what our ask is until we have a clear picture of how to explain to these entities what the effects of their current policies and how they affect one another, and how we're literally caught in the middle. And so, we've had conversations with CRISP, we've had conversations with Georgia Power. Again, I appeal to each of you as commissioners. There are plenty of concessions given when commissioners come with specific, kind of district-specific issues that affect constituents. With them, this is unfortunate. Well, it's unfortunate that we have this issue, but it is also geographically all part of District 4. When you look at Lake Chehaw. And so these are the citizens that have been blowing up my email, my cell phone, that we've had, town hall meetings with. We've worked to assess the problem internally as best possible, made those outreaches to the entities. Until we have this information, there's not a clear ask that we have of them. I don't know that we're going to have to go to FERC and ask them to adjust any federal policy. It may be simpler than that. It may not be, but we don't know what we don't know until we have this information.
I agree. I support it.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on what Commissioner Gray was saying. Did you have anything before I close it, Mr. Newsom? Okay, I agree with what Russell was saying, because sometimes whoever sit in that seat before, those issues was there, but now you have a commissioner that has the fortitude to bring that issue to the table. And I think all of us sometimes, we run into issues that's why we elected. So I can't really deal with the different entities. I don't know, I'll ask Russell this. Maybe if Scott can go and ask them, would they be, those entities be willing to participate in the cost? But at the end of the day, it affects those citizens in Dougherty County. And if I can know a little bit earlier that, hey, this water is coming down, I don't think that's a lot of money. And I'm saying that based on me as an individual elected official, when I bring things to the table, like the alleys is a very perfect example. That commissioner that sat in that table didn't understand the importance. And now we see that manifestation. So again, I think I look at what can I do as why I'm elected. And that's kind of where it is. It might seem unusual, but it's not unusual, because that person brought it to our attention, and here it is on our desk. So I don't have a problem with maybe asking those other two entities, but at the end of the day, I'm just as concerned about knowing how that water flow. And if nobody else want to spend that money, that's not important to them, but it is important to Commissioner Russell based on those constituents. That's why they elected him. And so I'll just commend you for bringing that to the table. When I look at the value of somebody's house, no matter where they live, is important if my house get flooded. So again, if there's something that we can do, I don't know, and you probably have had that discussion, was any grants available for that particular, or is it any reimbursable grants? But again, I think to solve the problem is, can we really just ask them, would they be willing to participate in this particular cost? And then after that, let's come back to the table. I don't know. That's kind of where I see it, because we trying to force somebody else to do something, and it's not important to them, but it is important to those constituents that Commissioner Russell represents. So again, just like me, people thought the alleys was not important, but it was important. And I had the fortitude to bring to the table, just like, and I hate to say it like this, but last year we did some out of the box things with recreation. So again, and we added on to some parks and things of that nature. So hey, I look at the importance, and when an elected official come to the table and you didn't come up with the problem. Somebody came to you to help you solve the problem. So, and I guess that's what we look at. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Commissioner Gaines.
I really hate to beat a dead horse here, but we do. The only reason we were able to pave those alleys is because they were specifically listed in a SPLOST program. That was the only reason.
Yeah,
this is not specifically listed in a SPLOST program.
This is all stormwater runoff.
But it's a need. It was a need that had been sitting on the table.
Of course it's a need, but then you do things within programmatic needs. You project what your costs are for that particular project, and you justify it with the public. That has not gone through that process.
Correct.
And if it had been in a SPLOST, and that's why I raised the question in the beginning, then there would be no problem whatsoever. However, this is really extraordinary in that we don't have the responsibility for this kind of things. We do have the responsibility for alleys. We have the responsibility for drainage within Dougherty County. We do, and this is extraordinary in my opinion, and maybe I'm a little bit off. And I know that I'm a lot more stingy than so many in how we spend money. But it just seems to me this is something that we are jumping off, spending a lot of money for that we don't know what our other options are at all. And we have not planned for this, and I just don't see that it is time now even to ask for this kind of money, because we haven't looked at where we can get this kind of service outside of government. Can one of the, because there are a lot of well-funded environmental groups around who will probably be interested in this subject. We haven't looked at that. So government is sort of the last resort, in my opinion, to fund something like this.
Okay, so with your statement, what was some of the solutions that you might recommend, the path that we take to
Yes, me?
Yes, ma'am.
As I suggested, there are a lot of environmental groups around that may be interested in this problem. And I understand the problem. And I understand that it could very well impact the entire Dougherty County. But this is not something that we have planned for. This is not something that, this is potentially a project that would take away from the drainage program that we have planned. So it seems to me that we could, certainly the first stop would be to talk to the folks who actually own the facility. We need to consult with FERC about what some potential, what are their thoughts about it? And then there are the environmental groups. So there are three possibilities there that we don't really know what their position is on this particular subject. So the first thing we hear about this is a request for money, and we don't know the full scope of what this problem really is, or what the potential is for addressing it in a different way. And we are just asked to throw a great deal of money at it from the onset. And that's not how I would address it with a small amount of money.
Thank you. Commissioner Gaines, Commissioner Johnson, and we'll wrap up after.
I have no comment, sir.
You have no comment?
Mr. McCoy does.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes, sir, Mr. Vice Chairman. I want to, hello, can you hear me? Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good deal. Just from a historical perspective.
I can't hear you, Mr. McCoy.
Okay, can you hear me now?
A little better.
Is this better? Hello?
Okay.
Okay, this, all right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. Just for historical perspective, Commissioner Gray met with his constituents that live in that area. Georgia Power was brought to the table. Crisp County was contacted. Georgia Power spoke to the Board of Commissioners late last year. They mentioned FERC could be approached and asked to allow them to, I think, increase the amount of water they could release, but them independently doing that may not solve the problem without coordination with CRISP Authority. And so the constituents also ask for the placement of flood gauges and a website that we could that they could go to and monitor water levels and to help us better manage potential incidences of flooding, and that's why we had the emergency management agency involved. And so we are now here presenting this information because if we were to go to FERC, we would have data to say what needs to be done in terms of the management of the flow of the water. And so we have been in contact with both Georgia Power and CRIS Authority, and so here's our recommendation. Of course, you guys will react to it.
So let's do this. Let's table this for 2 weeks. Let Mr. McCoy and I go back to these entities, see if they're willing to help defray the cost of this, and then we'll come back with the report on whether or not it is supported financially from other entities. We'll also look at any stakeholders, and to your point, Commissioner Gaines, around environmental organizations. Environmental organizations are only going to donate money where they have a vested interest in, and so there's not a lot of wildlife harmed. There's not a water quality issue here. There's not a bunch of harm that's being done except to property and infrastructure. And so with that said, I don't know what they're would be willing to stake to support a study that doesn't directly fit their mission and objectives, but we can certainly ask.
Okay. Want to add anything, Commissioner Newsom?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Gaines, did you hear, and Commissioner Jones, what Commissioner Russell was saying, table it and have further discussion?
Yes, and I, in my other life, that is exactly what I did. I was the chief environmental planner for MARTA for many, many years. And if I could help in any way, Commissioner, I would be happy to do so.
I really appreciate that. So anything you want to end it, Mr. Scott?
No, sir.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, additional
But
business.
you got a motion on the floor there, I think.
There's no
It wasn't a motion.
No.
It wasn't a motion.
Okay.
I just think rather than bringing this up for a vote next week with the ambiguity we have on this, give us 2 weeks to see about some alternative funding sources and see where we can garner some external support and come back before we bring this up for a vote.
You clear on that, Commissioner Jones?
I'm clear.
Oh, I appreciate you. But no, it wasn't a motion. All right, going to item 7, additional business. Recommendation from you is, okay, you still here, huh, Mr. Scott? Recommendation from the Albany Fire Department to apply for the fiscal year 2020 Assistance to Firefighters Grant from the Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and Grant Program Dougherty in the amount of $488,958.31 to purchase a tanker truck. This amount includes the local match amount of $48,895.83. Funding is available in Supply 7. Assistant County Administrator Scott Addison and Fire Chief Mr. Scott will address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be an excellent use of the funding we have remaining in SPLOST 7. And Chief brought this opportunity to our attention last week, and I'll let him explain the grant.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning. It's great to see all of you and be here this morning. This is, of course, the Assistance to Firefighters Grant program. It's an annual program that Mr. Addison and you have laid out. I'll just provide some of the specifics. The available funding this year is a little bit over $319 million. Okay. The anticipated number of awards that they believe they may give out is around 2,000 awards from this particular grant opportunity. So we looked at it. It looked like it would be a good opportunity for Dougherty County to get another tanker truck. As you know, we're very appreciative of the one that we have on order. This will give us another one to put on the other side of the county provide much needed water in those areas of our community that is without hydrants. So this purchase would be a repeat of the purchase that you've already made and invested. So we're trying to get it done. We're working hard on it and hope that you'll give us your support to move forward and apply for this grant opportunity.
Absolutely. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Gaines, Commissioner Jones?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Chief. And, you know, actions on this item will be scheduled in a few minutes. Thank you, Chief. County Administrator, have anything you want to?
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
County Attorney,
Nothing.
Mr. Newsom?
Nothing.
Okay. Commissioner Gray?
Nothing.
Commissioner Johnson?
Nothing.
Commissioner Gaines?
Nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Jones?
Another thing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. That's come to the end of this particular meeting, and we are going to go into the agenda for a special call meeting follows this exact meeting.
There's a note on your agenda, sir.
Say that again?
There's a note on your agenda, sir.
Oh, we'd also like to wish Commissioner Gaines happy birthday. And Commissioner Jones, you have to sing this song.
I'm good.
No, say it.
Happy birthday, dear Commissioner Gaines. Happy birthday to you.
Sounds
Thank you,
good.
Commissioner Jones. my ears were plugged.
Meeting's adjourned.
It's not about making you feel good, it's the thought.
It's the thought, you're correct.
Okay. Sounds good. Mission.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Happy birthday. Meeting's adjourned. Okay. Now, Anita, like to come back to another meeting for our special call meeting on this particular issue. We'll again do the roll call again. Commissioner Newsom?
Here.
Commissioner Russell?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Gaines?
Present.
All right. Commissioner Jones?
Present?
Good. Let me find my other notes here. Okay. Additional business. Consider for action for the recommendation from the Albany Fire Department to apply for the fiscal year 2020 Assistance to the Firefighters Grant from the Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the grant program Dougherty in the amount of $488,958.31 to purchase a tanker truck. This amount includes the local match amount of $48,895.83. Funding is available in Splash 7. Action, in motion.
Motion to approve.
Need a second?
Second.
Any discussions? Not. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All, okay. Nays? All in favor? The motion passed. Thank you. Anybody want to add to this particular meeting before we adjourn? Any commissioners? Everybody, all minds are clear? Meeting is adjourned.